Hi, everybody. This is another episode of We Are M&R, and today I'm talking with Tyler Gibson from UberPrints. Welcome, Tyler. Now you go ahead and talk about UberPrints a little bit and
Yeah.
tell us what you do there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for having me on, Tom. I think this will be really cool. So UberPrints is a web platform that allows anybody and everyone to go online and design and order your own custom printed t-shirts and apparel. So we have a website with our own design studio that really is the crux of the business. It's where you can use our design templates and clip art and text and tools and stuff to put together your own design um, from a selection of 200 plus different products that we have in our product catalog. And you order through the site, and we take care of the order fulfillment part of it. So we're based in Athens and Atlanta, Georgia, where we have a couple different offices. In Athens, we have our main production facility where we offer screen printing, embroidery, and what we call digital printing, which is direct to garment printing. And we also have another facility in Athens where we house a customer service team, our production artists, and a bunch of auxiliary roles. And then we have a third office actually in Atlanta where we do most of the web-based things. So it's where we have our web development, marketing, design, and those sorts of things that kind of pull all the pieces together. And my role here is pretty much as someone who can help lead and push together projects that span kind of the multidisciplinary nature of what we do. Things that span our web products through what we actually do in order fulfillment. So that's sort of my role, and it's ambiguous on purpose. So
You have one of those titles that kind of covers
yeah,
a bunch of stuff that
right,
that
right,
everybody wants to get done, right? You
yeah,
get results, the results guy. Yeah, I can see
right,
that. When did
exactly.
you start with UberPrints?
So I actually started working here in 2016. I had recently graduated from the University of Georgia, where I got my degree in art, actually. So I'm a sort of artist and craftsman by trade, doing a lot of um, wood and metal fabrication and things like that was sort of my focus. But I also actually have had a good bit of experience in printmaking and even screen printing and sort of the fine art side of it before working at UberPrints. But I also sort of had a background in our facilities management and stuff like that at the university. And so when I came on at UberPrints, it was to supervise and manage our direct to garment side in our production facility. And in the last, I guess, 4 years, I've transitioned through a lot of different departments, managing things here and there to the point where now I work in our Atlanta team. So I've dabbled in just about everything that we do. So that's sort of what uniquely positions me to kind of have the input that I have for our projects here. So
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting things about UberPrints that I've noticed right out of the gate. Like I noticed that with you having such a strong kind of penetration into the web-based,
right,
you know, drive for business that I thought that might be a really interesting, kind of
yeah,
side topic to cover in the fact that most screen printers are the opposite, right? They'll
right.
start and maybe that's the way UberPrint started, but they'll start locally and then slowly they start to get their reach extended out from their local environment. Whereas
Right.
UberPrint seems so kind of strong as far as it doesn't matter where you're at for ordering. So maybe you can
Right.
speak to that.
Yeah, and that really is so I mean that really is the heart of the business. And I guess is a good segue where I can maybe touch a bit on the inception of the company from the get-go. So we are kind of what you picked up on, a web company first, and a print shop sort of second, which is unique. And it started that way. Actually, the two founders, which are also UGA alumni, um, first had a sort of business that they ran out of their apartment together, that was just sort of reselling blank apparel. This was back in the kind of 2003, 2004 time period. And they actually were moving apparel to local screen shops and things like that, who would order apparel through them. And they held accounts with a lot of the apparel distributors. And that eventually evolved into people starting to ask if they could get things printed on these shirts. And a lot of people, they noticed, didn't want to deal with the 24 piece minimums, or even some of the 40 plus piece minimums of the typical screen print shops. And so they just saw an opening for doing small runs, if not one-off prints on the t-shirts that they were selling. And even though they weren't t-shirt printers themselves to start with, the one of the founders, Johnny, who is functionally the lead developer and architect of our web platform, who was at the time going to school for computer science, took it upon himself to work on a web solution that would let people order online, and then they could start initially with the sort of heat press tech, kind of your typical print off, and then heat press technique, do one off printed apparel. So that was the beginning of UberPrints. There was a lot of work to put together the initial platform that then could be pushed out online, and it was nothing like what it is now. There's been huge dramatic improvements since, but that was the building blocks. And so they went from working out of a garage, the two of them, to building more website features, starting to do more of the production themselves, bring on embroidery and screen printing and things like that. And now we are at almost 100 employee company, with these departments and everything. And because this started, UberPrints was founded in 2005 officially, was when it launched. We've had a sort of foothold in the online market for that reason. The online landscape was very different in 2005 than it is now. Things are so much more competitive. Google advertising costs much more than it used to. And there's a lot of businesses that have um, come into the space mostly because of the advancements in direct to garment printing, which is actually something that UberPrints was kind of starting out a little in front of the development of that technology. And really, the technology has sort of caught up with what we wanted to do from the very beginning. And so we were some of the first adopters of some of the older DTG machines, and have just sort of evolved with that technology also. But we've always offered screen printing as well, for larger orders and all of that, and embroidery too. So yeah, we've sort of expanded, and our web presence has stayed pretty strong. But that's a big thing for us is trying to to keep that foothold in the web market.
Yeah, that's a great way to kind of segue into some of these other things that we could talk about. First, I
Yeah,
probably need to touch on the just a brief COVID kind of, I kind
yeah,
of, it's important to skim over it because for some people it isn't a skim, right? It's like a
right.
huge speed bump, and then other
Yeah,
people, and I'd just be curious because of the way that UberPrints is somewhat, well, maybe mostly web driven, how
yeah.
it affected you versus some of the other screen printers.
Yeah, I mean, so we are, effectively 100% web driven. There's, maybe there are customers that we, somebody happens to know personally, and through word of mouth, they kind of get to us, and they'll call us trying to, wanting to place an order. But effectively, 100% of our orders come through our website. Um, and yeah, I mean, it has been definitely a scary time for, I think, virtually everyone. It's been at times really surreal, and I think everybody's sort of feeling that it's felt like, at certain times in both business and in your personal lives, that it's sort of like living in a movie. It was very weird to have entire cities come to a standstill. So that I think everybody's pretty much on the same page as far as that goes. And for us, it's been extremely volatile. We are used to dealing with volatility because of being a web company. We operate on really short turnaround times. We do kind of a different type of volume than your typical screen print shop. Maybe we're overall doing more shirts, but we are definitely doing more individual orders because a large part of our customer base is looking for small runs and things. But this has been a type of volatility that I don't think that we've ever seen before. And everybody experienced this, a sort of overnight plummet and then just a totally unpredictable kind of volatility since. And spikes and valleys, I think, are just the nature of it. But thankfully, we've been able to capture some of the national volume, which is something you touched on, that you don't have to live near Georgia to be able to order from us. And so that's definitely helped. But since this has been a global crisis, it's not like we were spared because of that. So
Absolutely. And it's a similar thing for a lot of companies that um, I think the one thing that has kept companies rolling to some degree versus
right,
being completely shut down is that web component, right? Because
right,
they're able to get orders that maybe other people can't do, or they're able
right,
to have the flexibility or adaptability that companies that maybe don't have the diversity of influx of business, right? They're
right.
just tied to the local. So I think there's that. One thing that I would, and I'm not even, I'm trying to formulate the question in my mind, but I think it's, in a sense, it's a fundamental difference, which is I think most companies, at least in the decorated apparel, really struggle with getting volume orders online dealt
Mm,
with versus just a handful of orders as a solution, if that makes sense. Like
right,
getting that
right.
volume and then also shuffling it, right? So I think maybe it's a two-part question, dealing with the variability of volume versus one-off versus three, getting them in
Mm.
online and processing them well. And then the other is like the typical argument of death by a thousand cuts. Like if you want to crash a small company, give them 1,000 orders of one shirt, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Versus one order of 1,000, right? So maybe
right.
you want to speak to that just briefly. How
Yeah,
you
I mean it's probably something that we were thankfully set up to already be taking advantage of. It's I think we are definitely thankful that we're in a space that is totally web driven. So we didn't have to shift from a sort of brick and mortar model to an e-commerce model and try and do that overnight to be able to pivot the business, which I know is what most people are having to do in just retail and service industry kind of period. So thankfully, we were already online. That was something that is what the company is about. Um, and one thing that we've noticed is that doesn't in the apparel industry, and maybe because of the customers that we serve. Um, that wasn't a total solution because maybe you can place the order online, but people need t-shirts for a reason. People need something printed because they themselves are a local barber shop that has a small bit of merchandise that they sell out of their shop to their customers, or they're a restaurant that makes that gets apparel printed for their staff. Or their events being planned and things like that, that they're, a 5K run, and all of those things were suddenly canceled. So that was just an impact that being online didn't solve. It didn't, while we may be online, our customers rely on physical interaction for the reason why they need their orders in the first place. So that's one thing. But in to your other point about the balance between the different types of customers, small orders, and things like that. I think that the web driven customers are definitely leaning towards the smaller orders. Typically, your direct to garment solutions and things like that. And I think that's probably just a matter of what types of customers like to interact with their print shops in a certain kind of way. When you're somebody who just wants to make a kind of cool, witty T-shirt for a party that you're going to, um, you know, not only can a regular screen shop not make that just single one-off shirt unless they have their own direct-to-garment printers, but that person is just so much more likely to go to Google and search, where can I get one T-shirt printed? And it's companies like UberPrints and others that are already in that space. And because we've already been in that space, we have from the very beginning been set up and always solving the problems of how to deal with lots and lots of very small orders. On our direct to garment side, maybe the average order size is, somewhere in between 2 to 3 shirts. Plenty of them are single shirts. Um, and, on our screen print side, the average is not very high either. We have a 12 piece minimum as of right now, and we'd actually like to push that lower. And we do lots and lots of 12, 18, 20 piece orders. And our average, I'm just generally ballparking here, might be in the range of 30 pieces. And that's always been a big factor in the way that we set up our production facilities, and the problems that we preempt and build solutions for. So our art department is set up to handle a large volume of individual orders, and our production facilities are take that into account also. It's that is another big reason why, even if you just walk into our screen print facility, it's likely nothing like any other screen print facility, because we're just so used to taking lots and lots of really small orders comparatively, to a shop that's used to taking them in maybe in the thousands of pieces, or at least hundreds of pieces. And we do those orders also for sure. We definitely have some customers that come to us for a 2,000 piece order, but the vast majority of them are people just looking for 12. So that's always been a part of our strategy and our business model from the beginning.
One thing that I noticed, like when looking at your Instagram or Facebook, and it probably is maybe more anecdotal than real to me,
Mm,
but I notice it, and that's going from companies' Instagrams, going from companies' Facebooks. You could kind of tell which companies are organized and systemized just by
mm,
looking at the way that they produce their online content and
right,
also the way that they organize their, even if it's organizing their images that they do online, to some
right.
degree, you can kind of do that. And I think maybe just briefly, how, with that, how important is having proper systems in place? I mean, it has to be pretty
Yeah.
important, I would think, right?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I mean, really from top to bottom, it's maybe most necessary in order fulfillment, um, because you just have to have a way to bring in and train new employees. You have to have a way to predictably get the same results, or at least be able to know how orders are going to pass through your business. And that's probably a very large difference between us and a typical screen print shop. And there are honestly pros and cons to both approaches. Um, your typical brick and mortar screen print shop is able to work one on one with a customer, plan out a production schedule well ahead of time, do extensive pre-press work where they'll print multiple proofs, they'll have meetings, and that all makes sense when you're planning to print thousands of shirts of that same design. And in our case, really the value that we bring to our customers is the simplicity of the ordering process. And so our philosophy is in a lot of ways different than the brick and mortar screen print shop, and that our goal is to talk to customers as little as possible. Because that's ultimately why they came online to UberPrints and used our service, is because they wanted it to be easy. They didn't want the back and forth, and they wanted it to be simple. And so for that reason, we have to have a lot of predictability in our production systems. We are for that, the downside is that then we have to be more, that structure means that we don't have the same kind of freedom to really make something that's overly unique. At your typical screen print shop, they can do all these prints, and while we'll Pantone match, they can do a custom mixture that then they get to hand to a customer in person and have them look at the color, and then they'll go back and they'll do that for the run. And they can do lots of fine tuning to one individual order. And that works for a lot of customers. And a lot of customers want that. If you're an apparel brand that really wants your brand and logo expressed in a very specific way, because you're going to go and resell that to your customers. But in our case, we're serving, people who want to just get really cool looking t-shirts easily for their family reunion, or, that's sort of our go-to example, even though family reunions probably, represent a absolutely minuscule percentage of our orders. That's just always the first one that comes to mind. But businesses too that aren't reselling the apparel, they just need it quick and easy. They have too many other problems to deal with. They're running their own business. They don't have the time to deal with all the intricacies of printing apparel. They need something that works, looks good, and they can rely on, so that they can get another shirt printed when they hire another employee, so that they can wear a matching shirt. And in our case, they can just go online and hit reorder, and then it shows up at their door. So we have to build in systems that serve that purpose, the ease of use purpose, and the downside being that we don't have the same kind of freedom to cater to very specific demands on individual orders in the same way that you can at a brick and mortar shop. But yeah, it's vitally important, or we wouldn't be able to handle the sheer volume of different orders every single day. Yeah,
That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, in a sense, like you have to know who your customers are to build
right,
your systems around the customers. You can't
right,
build systems, separate from that. I think that's an area where a lot of screen printers, they if they grow their shop from the ground up, their systems tend to be that way. One thing that's interesting too, maybe just as an extra note, is one area that since I'm a little bit in the marketing side, obviously,
right.
and MR and whatnot, that I think
Yeah,
about right out of the gate is how customer service is done online versus personal, like which is
right,
in a large way, like what you're talking about. But there's a fine line between doing really good customer service and doing customer surgery, as I call it, which is
right,
like where you are trying to extract every drop of blood from a customer when they come into your
right.
website, whether
Yeah,
it's a portal that you have to click 50 times to leave,
right.
or if you know what I mean. And so
Yeah,
maybe you can speak to upselling, cross-selling, and the
yeah.
whole sales process versus person and online.
Yeah, and actually, that's one thing that I think definitely sets us apart from other web companies in general, not even necessarily e-commerce companies in the t-shirt space, but just e-commerce companies in general, is that we are extremely wary about kind of being overbearing. And e-commerce companies nowadays are just, um, it sometimes it is ridiculous that the number of emails that you'll get sent to you when you even just visit a site, and the number of pop-ups that you have to click through, and the number of pages just to get through a checkout sequence, because they're trying to upsell you on other products. And that is frankly something that I think, um, the other people here at UberPrints, we all kind of unanimously agree um, that we just want to set ourselves apart from that kind of model. Even if in the short term it may mean sacrificing a certain amount of order volume, to not fall into the trap of being overbearing towards customers. Because I think we feel like in the long term, it'll serve us better to err on the side of less kind of marketing intrusion, and maybe we'll retain a different kind of customer, for that reason, because we were sort of less intrusive. So we're always erring on the side of being less intrusive when it comes to that, for sure. Um,
I always think to myself, Tyler, I was like, what type of people actually buy like a diaper with their screen print on it, or they buy like these random items
yeah.
they're just throwing at
Yes.
them? It's literally like it's insane almost. Like you look
Yeah.
at, and I don't have to name anybody in particular, but everybody knows who I'm talking about. And it's just like
Right.
the amount of, it's like a bad like sci-fi movie where there's all
Yeah.
these like, it's like level 3, level 4. You gotta fight all the like characters up to the top
Yeah.
boss just to get through the
Yeah.
website and complete the order. I'm just
Yeah.
like, it's straight up video game land,
Yeah.
but so I appreciate that because I can tell that, you can tell a difference between genuine customer service online
Right.
versus what, surgery or extraction. But
Yeah.
would you say, what would you say as far as, it's always good for me to touch on this. Like, what's a, would you say COVID is maybe the biggest roadblock you've seen while working for UberPrints? Like, what are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome while you're working there? Anything stick out in your mind?
Yeah. Well, briefly to touch on something you said before that, and then I guess I can answer your question. When it comes to you seeing all those other just sort of seemingly random products that people offer, that's another thing that we've steered clear of. We offer pretty much only apparel. There are some bags on there for some embroidery products and things like that, but we steer clear of just selling pins and mugs and keychains, and that's just not the space that we want to be in. There are plenty of companies, doing great in that promotional product space. But we're specifically apparel printers. And I think that we feel like there's something unique specifically about printed t-shirts, that's not the same as printed all other items. And they maybe seem like they go together, but in our mind, they couldn't be any more different. The purpose for printed apparel is just nothing like the purpose of all those other items.
You know
Um,
what, Tyler? I'm gonna interrupt you there just for
yeah,
1 second to say this because I've been thinking
yeah,
about this for a while, and one area where I've said this to a couple printers before, but if you think about it in a sense, like the proximity of artwork on a T-shirt
yeah,
is the closest proximity a person gets to a piece of artwork as far as an identity and even physical
yeah,
proximity versus maybe a tattoo. You know
right,
what I mean? And so
yeah,
so there is actually something to that, right? Versus
right,
versus the object you might stick on your wall that has some art or something. Like you're actually, pressing a piece of artwork against your body
right.
physically as a
Yeah.
representation, which I think there is something to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the way that we wear t-shirts too. And just the way that t-shirts interact with our lives. I mean, um, yes, maybe if I go to a brewery, I might buy one of their glasses or something like that. Um, but maybe that's specific to that, brewery or whatever. But the brewery definitely sells far more shirts than they sell glasses. And they sell far more, hats than they do, their mugs or whatever, even though their business is in beer, and
Yeah.
that's because we put on shirts sort of like a personal billboard, in a way, and for people it represents, if you go to a really cool gym and you want to wear their shirt, it's because you really are proud of going to the gym that you go to, and you want to wear that. And if I go to a brewery that I really like, then I buy their shirt because it's a sort of show of support, and me wearing around their logo, is a sort of pride in being associated, with what somebody else does. It's really cool. And it's the same thing when you have, a family reunion. You want everybody in matching t-shirts because there's some sort of like camaraderie around, getting everybody wearing the same thing, that you just don't experience with other products. you know, you're not getting matching pins or matching keychains or whatever. You're getting matching, you know, shirts or jerseys or hoodies or whatever. Um, and there seems to be something unique about interacting uh, with apparel in that way that other items don't have. And that's really why we stick to that side, where we're only going to specialize in apparel, so we don't sort of water down that message with other items. And then other people sort of start to get that message, so that when businesses come to us, you know, we want to be experts in apparel printing and t-shirt printing. And so it just seems impossible to be an expert in, you know, all of those products. There just seems to be, you know, I haven't, you know, necessarily tried to print on all of those different products and everything, but it just seems to me like there would be some sort of loss in the sort of um, expertise, or in just the value of any one of those things by diversifying too much. So that's really the big point for us.
Yeah, for sure. And then I don't want to forget, we were going to talk
Yeah,
about some sort of challenge
yeah, yeah,
that you had while you were, what, or at least that you experienced while you're working there. And
yeah.
maybe the COVID is, but I was just curious if you've seen something that stands out in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that COVID feels like maybe the biggest challenge, just because it's been a challenge, you know, top to bottom. It's been, um, you know, weird to have to almost universally work from home, and distance from people. It's made collaborating more difficult. Um, and then, like I said, the sort of volatility um, that we've experienced in order fulfillment makes that extremely difficult. And you know, volatility is always difficult, but this seems to be erratic in a way that you know, seasonal changes aren't, and seasonal changes are predictable. We know going into the, you know, November December time period of every year that we're going to see the kind of influx in order volume for our digital printing that we always see. And we can monitor, you know, website traffic and things like that, and put some, you know, predictive analysis around that. There just seems to be no way of predicting anything right now. So, um, you know, maybe it's the biggest one, but it kind of feels like a cop out a little bit to name COVID as the biggest challenge, because it's likely been just about everyone's biggest challenge in a way. So, I mean, maybe aside from that, it's similar, but it's been what you kind of touched on, and what we were talking about before, having to put together systems um, to uh, to be able to manage the volume of different orders, and just the variety that we get from customers. I at one point was our production art department manager. Um, and sort of in that role, you can imagine just the extreme variety of curveballs that we're given when there's no real screening process for what somebody can come on our site and order. Because we let people use our design tools, which really speeds things up, because we have a way of automating that process pretty efficiently, where we can take, you know, if you use only tools on our website, the process is much simpler for us, because we built those tools ourselves, and we can streamline the order fulfillment. But we also let people upload their own images, because that can be your own company logo and things. It can be a photograph of your family. And when you give customers the freedom to mix and match all of these things, um, and you know, we sort of have a, I wouldn't say really a disclaimer, but we, you know, we do have to contact customers frequently. We try and solve problems without contacting them, for sure. But it's inevitable, you know. It just, there's no way around some of those difficulties. And in the art department, it's probably most noticeable there, because they're sort of because they're tasked with setting up the orders for print. they are the ones that have to sort out all of those issues before it gets to production. So maybe it's difficult for production because they are doing a 9 color job on, 38 shirts or something like that. Um, but the art department had to figure out, well, what they actually gave us is 20 different individual colors. What's the best way of figuring out how to simplify this? How do we deal with communicating that to the customer? And so our department works hand in hand with our customer service department to come up with solutions, and feed that back to customers, try and get them in the loop, because fundamentally they don't understand why there's an issue with their order. Because again, the whole purpose of the website was to get on there and do it simply. So they don't have any background knowledge. They don't understand how screen printing works. They don't even understand why there's a 12-piece minimum from the beginning. And trying to keep that communication concise, but also give them as full of an explanation as possible is really difficult. And in the art department, there was a lot to sort out when it came to how to deal with these types of issues as we continue to scale up, as we see more and more orders. It compounds very quickly when you have that many problems. And I actually had a conversation one time with um, I think his name is Charlie Fassini. He's the CEO of Freehand Graphics that makes Separation Studio, and that's supposed to be a tool to really expedite the art process when you have really complicated separations. And I was having trouble working with that software and making it very useful for us. And I was able to thankfully get on the phone with him and sort of explained our problem. And his response is pretty much, well, Separation Studio isn't going to solve that for you.
Yeah.
He started bringing up, you can't, just throw any and all of these problems in Separation Studio and expect something usable back. You are going to need more tools in your tool belt. You're ultimately going to need to know how to do index color separations, and simulated process, and sort of make an actual distinction between simulated process and spot process in a sort of um, fundamental way that I think maybe people, I know those words are used interchangeably, effectively, but for lack of having another term for it, there's fundamentally some sort of difference between simulated process and spot process.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and and being able to sort of build up our tool belt so that we could handle the just extreme variety of curveballs that we get from customers. So that's been a huge hurdle for us, but that's inherently part of everything that we're striving to be better at all the time, is be better at handling those curveballs, be better at making the process simpler for customers, and ultimately all in service of getting customers better looking shirts than they thought they were going to get. That's really the goal, is somebody hits order and they get a box at their house that they're really wowed by, because they knew that they kind of uploaded a bunch of subpar images and things, and we managed to not contact them a single time, and they got something that looked phenomenal. So that's really what our goal is.
That's the trickiest part to me. It really is managing the art, because I've been involved in the art from
Yeah,
the very beginning with screen printing, and I've trained people in separation, trained people in index versus
right.
simulated versus these things, and even the terminology can be challenging for people, let
Yes,
alone trying to actually walk people through some sort of automated process. Even if you put a template online, somebody's going to
right,
try to stick an elephant in the middle, of it,
right.
or whatnot.
Yeah,
I think that is one of the tricks, and also one of the bigger challenges is having policies that don't come across as like draconian, right? But at the
mhm,
same time, you can't have customers taking advantage of you and saying, yeah, I like everything with that, except can you make it an elephant and change all the type and the colors and everything at the last
yeah,
minute?
yeah,
And having that that's part of your system, where it's like, oh, well, we want you as a customer, but,
right.
kind of that
Yeah,
that conversation.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that we constantly battle with, and it's probably something that we absolutely err on the side of maybe putting in too much effort, for sure. We see it as absolutely and maybe again going back to your questions about maybe how we're different as an e-commerce site, is that we see it a lot as you know, as far as the customer acquisition side of that marketing funnel. Um, we will go far above and beyond to win over a new customer, because we know what the lifetime value of a customer is, when we can get them, as a repeat, with repeat
Right.
business. And so yeah, I mean, especially if it's their first time there and it seems like something that we can pull off, we will definitely go above and beyond. And it's super frustrating for our team.
Yeah.
It can definitely get tensions running high because everybody has sort of competing. The different departments have sort of competing. Um, I don't know if you would say sort of incentives in a way that
Sure.
we're always working to try and align that, ultimately to in service of getting customers better t-shirts. So the customer service department, they're dealing with the fact that they have to call and talk to the customer about this. Like they're ultimately the one that's going to have to relay this message, and deal with, whatever the customer comes back with, and try and communicate it. And so, they're at the same time most wary about talking to the customer. They're also most likely to say that we need to go back to the customer because they don't want to deal with a problem later on, and maybe we want to not contact the customer and see if we can and get this right. The art department just sees every art issue and they just want a way to try and smooth out all of those as easily as possible. So they're more likely to go to customer service and say, we need to contact them about this issue. We're not going to be able to do this. And production is ultimately the one that's handed with the task of actually printing the shirt. And so, they're in some ways incentivized to not take on some of the really tough things because they know it feels to them like they're being set up to sort of fail, when you give them things that are really difficult. But ultimately, we want to do the things that are really difficult because there are absolutely things I know for a fact that you can order through us, on the printing and separation side of it, that you wouldn't be able to order from any of the other web-based companies. We'll print a number of colors that other places will not print. We'll do complicated simulated process separations that other companies won't touch. And we sort of have to deal with the problems that come with that, and get everybody aligned. And ultimately, everybody is. But when you're having a tough day, it's a tough day. So
Yeah, for
once you get
sure.
everybody aligned, that it is really all about getting the best thing to a customer, as possible, then you can make it happen.
Well, I want to respect your time, Tyler, but I really
Yeah.
appreciate all the, the discussion and learning more about UberPrints because I think it is a unique, way to craft and produce an apparel decorating business. And I think it,
Yeah.
maybe it's less unique than it used to be, but it's definitely, you guys have been very successful in that niche. And, I think that's a great example for people to look at and try to learn from. Where's the best way to get in touch with you guys? Or is there a certain way that you prefer other printers maybe to engage with you? Is it
Yeah.
social media or what do you have a preference there?
Yeah, if other printers, other people in the industry, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can, link up with me on LinkedIn. You can even shoot me an email. My name at uberprints.com, Tyler.Gibson. Um, but
Okay.
our customers can call our customer service department. But yeah, if you're in the industry, you can reach out to me directly for sure.
All right. Well, it was great talking to you. I look forward to chatting to you again soon. And then hopefully, next year if we see a reboot, because Printing United basically didn't make it this year, but hopefully next year, we'll get down there by you guys and
Yeah.
and check the place out in the flesh, so to speak. So thanks a
Yeah.
lot for your
Yeah.
time. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks.